Japan has more than 125 million people, and somehow still manages to have towns where you could walk the main street at noon and hear nothing but wind. Rural Japan is emptying out at a pace that surprises even the people watching it happen. These are the top 12 loneliest towns in Japan. Number 12. Kamikatsu, Tokushima Prefecture, Shikoku. Kamikatsu sits in the forested mountains of Tokushima Prefecture on the island of Shikoku. It has fewer than 1,500 residents. It's the smallest municipality on the island, and if you drive through without knowing where you are, you might mistake it for a village that time quietly moved on from. In one sense, that's exactly right. And in another sense, Kamikatsu has become one of the most discussed small towns in Japan. In 2003, Kamikatsu became the first municipality in Japan to issue a formal zero-waste declaration. The backstory is mundane. A new incinerator project fell through, and the town had to figure out what else to do with its garbage. What emerged was one of the most ambitious waste sorting systems anywhere in the country. Households are required to sort their garbage into up to 45 separate categories before bringing it to the town's waste center. Not recycling versus trash. 45 categories: cardboard, paper, magazines, glass by color, metals by type, the list goes on. Today, more than 80% of Kamikatsu's waste is kept out of incinerators and landfills. The waste center itself has become something of a community hub, a place where elderly residents come not just to drop things off, but to talk, to occupy time, to see other people. That detail says something about the particular texture of loneliness in small Japanese towns. The social infrastructure shrinks along with the population, and whatever remains, even a sorting station, becomes load-bearing for the community's sense of itself. Kamikatsu is trying. It's doing something genuinely notable, and it's still one of the emptiest places in Shikoku. What Kamikatsu also illustrates is the way rural Japanese communities have had to become creative out of necessity rather than ambition. Nobody in 2003 decided to build an international model for sustainable waste management in a mountain village of 1,500 people. They just couldn't afford a new incinerator and had to figure something out. The Zero Waste program has since attracted researchers, journalists, and foreign government delegations who come specifically to study how it works. The irony of a slowly depopulating village becoming an internationally studied model is not lost on its residents. Recognition doesn't reverse a demographic trend, but it gives Kamikatsu something that many emptying Japanese villages don't have: a reason for the outside world to know it exists at all. Number 11. Tsuwano, Shimane Prefecture. Shimane Prefecture, on the Sea of Japan coast of western Honshu, is one of Japan's most persistently underpopulated prefectures. It has been losing residents for decades, and within Shimane, the small town of Tsuwano carries that decline with a particular kind of dignity. It's a beautifully preserved castle town, often called Little Kyoto, with traditional white-walled buildings along a canal lined with carp. It looks like a postcard. It is also, by demographic projection, in serious trouble. Tsuwano had around 7,500 residents in the mid-2000s. Projections from Japan's National Institute of Population and Social Security Research suggested the town could lose more than half its population by 2040, with a particularly steep decline in the number of young women, the demographic whose presence or absence determines whether a community has a future. When the young women leave, the children don't come, and the cycle of decline accelerates. That arithmetic is not unique to Tsuwano, but Tsuwano is a clear illustration of it. The town draws visitors for its historic streetscapes, its annual summer dance festival, and its connections to Mori Ogai, the Meiji-era novelist and military physician who was born there. But a tourist town and a living town are different things, and Tsuwano has been navigating that distinction for years. The cafes open for visitors, the streets are maintained, and the residential population keeps sliding. There is a particular tension in a place like Tsuwano between its value as a preserved historical site and its reality as a thinning community. The preservation works in part because fewer people live there to change things. Old buildings stay old because no one is building new ones. The canal stays clear because the town government maintains it for visitors. The carp in the water are fed daily, and the school-age population quietly disappears, one cohort at a time, to cities where there are jobs and people their own age. The tourism economy sustains a version of the town. Whether it sustains the town is a different question. Number 10. Tono, Iwate Prefecture. Tono is known as the folklore capital of Japan, which is either charming or ominous depending on your disposition. The city sits in a wide mountain basin in Iwate Prefecture in the Tohoku region, and its identity has been inseparable from the supernatural since 1910, when a folklorist named Kunio Yanagita published Tono Monogatari, a collection of local legends and ghost stories gathered from villagers. The book documented kappa, river spirits, zashiki warashi, child spirits said to bring luck to the households they inhabit, and a cast of other beings from the local imagination that had been in circulation for generations. Today, Tono leans into all of that. There are kappa statues along the riverbank. There are designated spots where, according to tradition, you might encounter a zashiki warashi if you're quiet enough and patient enough. The city markets itself on its eerie, slow, misty atmosphere, the sense that the countryside around it is still inhabited by things that predate the modern world. The population of the broader Tono area has been declining steadily for years. The farming hamlets that originally supplied Yanagita with his stories have themselves become things of the past. Many of the isolated farmsteads that once dotted the hills around the basin are now empty or gone. The irony is that the legends of Tono were born from communities that no longer exist in any recognizable form. The ghost stories outlasted the villages that told them. Today, Tono's population is well under 30,000 and declining. The city has made a real effort to market its folklore identity. The kappa statues are maintained, walking maps lead visitors from legend site to legend site, and local schools teach the old stories as part of the curriculum. But the hamlets that originally produced those stories are gone. The farmhouses where people gathered around hearth fires and passed on tales of river spirits are either empty or demolished. What remains is a carefully tended memory of a place, marketed to visitors who come to experience an atmosphere that the people who originally created it no longer inhabit. That is a common condition in rural Japan. Tono just wears it more self-consciously than most. Number 9. Tsushima Island, Nagasaki Prefecture. Tsushima is a long, rugged island in the Tsushima Strait, sitting almost exactly between the Japanese mainland and the Korean peninsula. On a clear day, you can see Korea from its northern coast. It is closer to Busan than it is to Fukuoka. The island has about 708 square kilometers of land, and a population that, as of late 2024, sat at around 25,900 people, a figure that has been falling for years. The island's geography has always shaped its character. It was the site of the Battle of Tsushima in 1905, one of the most decisive naval battles in modern history, in which Japan's fleet destroyed the Russian Baltic Fleet in the strait that now bears the island's name. That event announced Japan as a major naval power. These days, Tsushima is considerably quieter. In one village on the island, Shitaru, the population dropped from 500 to 53 people within living memory. The island is dotted with abandoned houses, farms that nobody tends, and coastline that nobody patrols. There is one unusual recent development. Tsushima has become a significant destination for South Korean tourists, to the extent that Korean language signage now appears throughout the main town. Some residents have welcomed the economic activity. Others have expressed unease about what it means for the island's identity. Either way, the local Korean population has grown, while the local Japanese population has continued to shrink. A situation that is without precedent for an island that has defined Japan's western border for centuries. The island also struggles with practical daily infrastructure. Medical services are limited. Young families leave for Fukuoka or Nagasaki because schooling options on the island are restricted. The fishing industry that once anchored the local economy has contracted significantly. What Tsushima has in abundance is coastline, forest, and history. The ruins of ancient forts, a distinctive leopard cat species found nowhere else in Japan, and the quiet wait of a place that spent centuries as a crucial waypoint between two civilizations and now finds itself increasingly peripheral to both. Number 8. Aogashima, Tokyo metropolis. Yes, Tokyo. Technically, the most remote inhabited island in the Tokyo metropolis is a tiny volcanic cone sitting in the Philippine Sea, approximately 358 kilometers south of central Tokyo. Aogashima has a population of around 170 people, making it the smallest population municipality in all of Japan. It has been that way for decades. Getting there is its own exercise in patience. The only options are a helicopter flight, one trip per day, weather permitting, which in this part of the ocean is not a given, or a passenger ferry that runs a few times per week when sea conditions allow. The ferry journey from the neighboring island of Hachijojima takes roughly 2.5 hours. Hachijojima itself requires an 11-hour boat ride or a flight from Tokyo. The full journey can take days. If the weather turns, which it does frequently, you stay wherever you are. The island is a double caldera, a volcanic crater within a larger volcanic crater, and the inhabited area sits inside the inner caldera, surrounded by steep walls of volcanic rock. The island last erupted significantly in 1785, killing somewhere between 130 and 140 of its then 327 residents. The survivors evacuated to Hachijojima and didn't return for 50 years. The people who live on Aogashima today are, in a way, descendants of the stubborn, people whose ancestors chose to come back to a volcano in the middle of the sea rather than stay somewhere safer. That says something about the kind of loneliness that is also a choice. Life on Aogashima runs on a different clock than the mainland. Power comes from diesel generators. Fresh water is collected from rain and springs. Deliveries are weather-dependent, which means the shelves at the small shop are sometimes bare and sometimes stocked with whatever arrived on the last boat. Residents grow their own vegetables in soil made fertile by volcanic activity. There is a communal bathhouse that uses geothermal heat rising through the caldera floor. It is, in purely practical terms, one of the most remote permanently inhabited places in Japan, and the 170 or so people who live there have made a deliberate peace with that fact. Number 7. Okunoshima, Hiroshima Prefecture. Okunoshima is a small island in the Seto Inland Sea between Hiroshima Prefecture and Ehime Prefecture, and it has a population that consists almost entirely of rabbits. There are a few human caretakers and staff at a small resort hotel. There are approximately 1,000 rabbits, possibly more. The count is uncertain because rabbits, left to their own devices in a predator-free environment, are not cooperative census subjects. The island's history is darker than its current reputation suggests. During World War II, the Japanese military operated a secret chemical weapons production facility on Okunoshima. The island was removed from maps. Residents of the surrounding coastline were told to stay away and not to talk about what they saw. The facility produced poison gases, including mustard gas and tear gas, that were used in military operations in China. After the war, the facility was dismantled, documents were destroyed, and the island eventually became a public park. The origin of the rabbit population is disputed. Some accounts claim that school children introduced 8 rabbits in 1971, and the island's isolation and lack of predators did the rest. Others suggest different timelines. What is not disputed is that the rabbits are now a major attraction. Tens of thousands of visitors come each year specifically to be swarmed by friendly bunnies on the beach. The juxtaposition of the island's wartime history and its current identity as a cute tourist destination is something that requires a certain amount of mental flexibility to sit with. A small poison gas museum on the island documents the wartime history plainly and without softening. It receives far fewer visitors than the rabbits do. The ruins of the production facilities are still visible across the island. Concrete structures overgrown with vegetation, their original purpose unmistakable from photographs inside the museum, but easy to walk past if you've come for the bunnies. Okunoshima is genuinely odd in a way that goes beyond novelty. It is an island that produced weapons of mass destruction, was erased from official maps, and is now best known internationally as a place where rabbits will climb into your lap if you hold out a carrot. Japan contains multitudes. Okunoshima contains more than most. Number 6. Nagoro, Tokushima Prefecture, Shikoku. Nagoro is a village in the mountains of Tokushima Prefecture with fewer than 30 living residents and somewhere around 350 residents who are not living in the conventional sense. A woman named Tsukimi Ayano has spent years crafting life-sized, hand-sewn scarecrow figures of former residents and placing them throughout the village. At bus stops, in fields, in front of houses, in the classroom of the abandoned elementary school, seated at desks that no real child has used in years. Each figure represents a specific person who once lived in the village, the elderly neighbor who passed away, the children who grew up and moved to the city, the bus stop where someone used to wait who no longer waits there. Ayano started making the figures because she wanted to mark what was missing, not to pretend the village was still full, but to make the absence visible and human rather than just empty. Visitors who drive through the narrow mountain valley encounter the figures without warning. A group of scarecrows working in a terraced rice field, a cluster of figures looking out from a hillside. At dusk, when the light flattens and the valley goes quiet, the effect is genuinely difficult to dismiss. Nagoro attracts visitors who come specifically for this reason, people who have seen photographs and want to see what it actually feels like. The answer most of them give is stranger and sadder and more beautiful than they expected. Number 5. Nanmoku, Gunma Prefecture. Nanmoku sits in the mountains of Gunma Prefecture, about 70 miles northwest of Tokyo. That proximity to the capital might suggest accessibility, but the road winds through steep forested terrain, and the village itself is tucked into a narrow river valley that feels considerably further from Tokyo than the map suggests. Nanmoku has the oldest population of any municipality in Japan. As of 2023, 67.5% of its residents are 65 years old or older. The village peaked at around 10,900 people in 1950. By 2020, that number had fallen to 1,611, and the rate of decline has been accelerating, not slowing. At the current pace, some projections suggest Nanmoku could cease to have any residents within a decade or two. The village was historically known for silk production, timber, and konjac, a starchy root used extensively in Japanese cooking. None of those industries could sustain the village indefinitely against the pull of urban employment and the young left. A street sign on the narrow main road warns drivers to watch out for elderly pedestrians crossing. The junior high school was closed. 20 students share the elementary school building. High schoolers commute outside the village. There is a migration coordinator, Satomi Oigawa, who arrived from Tokyo after college to try to match abandoned homes with potential new residents. She described her motivation simply, "I felt like my relations with people in Tokyo were too shallow and broad. I really wanted to live in the countryside." Whether her efforts can bend the trajectory of a village that has been declining since 1950 remains genuinely unclear. What Nanmoku has that most declining villages don't is a degree of self-awareness about what is happening. The migration coordinator role, the Akia matching program, the deliberate outreach to younger people, these are signs of a community that has not simply accepted its fate passively. A village resident named Tomiko Kanbei, who helps mentor incoming young people, has framed it in terms of what the village still has to offer rather than what it's lost. The forests are intact, the river is clean, the pace of life is real in a way that urban life rarely is. Whether that pitch is enough to slow a 70-year decline is the open question. But it is at least a pitch, which is more than many villages in Nanmoku's position are still able to make. Number 4. Tashirojima, Miyagi Prefecture. Tashirojima is a small island in Miyagi Prefecture, accessible by ferry from Ishinomaki in about an hour and a half. It has no traffic lights. It has no convenience stores. There is no ATM. Dogs are not permitted on the island. Cats are everywhere. The cats have been on Tashirojima for a very long time. They were brought in by the island's silk farmers to control the mice that threatened the silkworms. When silk farming ended, the cats stayed on as companions to the fishing community that remained. Fishermen came to regard them as good luck. A small cat shrine was built on the island after a fisherman was reportedly killed by a falling rock while feeding cats, sometime around 2 centuries ago. The cats became sacred. Dogs were banned. The cat population is now estimated in the hundreds, spread across an island with a human population in the low dozens, nearly all of them elderly. Tashirojima became internationally known as Cat Island, a label that brings in visitors who come armed with cat food and cameras. The cats are friendly, well-fed, and completely unbothered by human attention. The 2011 tsunami struck the island and caused damage, and recovery aid arrived, with a notable portion specifically designated for the welfare of the cats. Life has continued on the island since then, in the way life continues, in places that are slowly, quietly winding down. The residents who remain tend to their routines. The cats go where they like. The ferry comes twice a day. The human population of Tashirojima is almost entirely elderly. There are no young families on the island in any meaningful number. The school closed years ago. There is no economic base that would attract younger residents, even if the lifestyle appealed to them. What the island has, beyond the cats and the coastline and the quiet, is a kind of end-of-the-line completeness. It is not a place in transition. It is a place in conclusion, moving toward a future where the cats will outnumber the people by an even wider margin, and eventually will have the whole island to themselves. Whether that constitutes a sad ending or simply a different kind of ending is probably a matter of perspective. The cats, for their part, appear entirely comfortable with either outcome. Number 3. Yubari, Hokkaido. Yubari is the clearest example Japan has of what happens when an entire town's reason for existing disappears. In its peak years, this coal mining city in central Hokkaido had a population of around 120,000 people. That was in the 1960s. The coal industry collapsed in the 1970s and 1980s, and the population began to leave. What makes Yubari different from simply declining is what happened next. The city tried to reinvent itself as a tourist destination. With government subsidies, it built a ski resort, a coal-themed amusement park, a film festival. The Yubari International Fantastic Film Festival ran for years and developed a real following. But the visitors weren't enough to offset the debts. And in 2007, Yubari became the first municipality in Japan to officially declare bankruptcy. A mine explosion in 1981 killed 93 workers. A second explosion in 1985 killed 62 more. After that, there was little argument to be made for staying. Today, Yubari has around 6,300 residents, down more than 90% from its peak. The streets are wide, designed for a city that no longer exists, and mostly empty. Store after store is boarded up. A family of deer has been spotted wandering in front of apartment complexes. One former miner who returned to Yubari in his old age, after spending most of his working life elsewhere, said it plainly. It's a sad and lonely old town. He wasn't complaining. He was just stating a fact about where he had chosen to end up. The city now actively manages its own contraction, merging schools, cutting services, trying to compact what remains of the population into something sustainable. It is less a story of failure than a preview. Japanese demographers refer to Yubari as a canary in the coal mine of national depopulation, the first place to reach a point that many other towns are still approaching. Number 2. The villages of Shimane Prefecture. Shimane, on the Sea of Japan coast of western Honshu, has the second lowest population density of any prefecture in Japan. It has been losing residents longer than almost anywhere else in the country, and the decline shows no sign of reversing. Entire hamlets in the interior of the prefecture have dwindled to single-digit populations. Farmland sits overgrown. Houses sit empty. Shimane is a prefecture with significant historical and cultural weight. It is home to Izumo Taisha, one of the oldest and most important Shinto shrines in Japan, a site of pilgrimage for more than a millennium. The shrine draws visitors, and the city around it has managed to hold its population more stably than the rest of the prefecture. But beyond the main towns, rural Shimane is a landscape of accelerating absence. A survey conducted a few years ago found that more than 20% of homes in some Shimane municipalities are akiya, abandoned properties with no resident and no prospect of one. Japan counted 9 million akiya nationwide in a 2023 government survey. Shimane is among the prefectures where that number is most visible and most dense. Researchers studying Japan's rural depopulation have described some of the province's interior valleys as places where the question is no longer how to stop the decline, but how to manage it with dignity. That is a significant shift in how a government thinks about its own territory. The language of managed decline is uncomfortable, but it's honest. Shimane's prefectural government has invested in broadband infrastructure to try to attract remote workers. Some municipalities offer subsidies to families willing to relocate. A handful of younger people have moved in, drawn by cheap land and the appeal of a slower life. But the numbers are small against the scale of the outflow. Peter Matanle, a sociologist at the University of Sheffield who has spent years studying Japan's shrinking communities, has noted that depopulation in areas like Shimane creates conditions where even biodiversity suffers. The carefully maintained rice paddies and coppiced woodland that characterize the Japanese countryside for centuries require human labor to persist, and without it, the landscape changes in ways that affect everything living in it. The emptying of Shimane is not just a human story. Number 1. Aomori and Akita prefectures, the loneliest region in Japan. If one place in Japan earns the title of loneliest region, it belongs to the northeastern prefectures of Aomori and Akita, on the Sea of Japan and Pacific coasts of northern Honshu. This is Tohoku at its most raw. Long winters, heavy snowfall, agricultural land that has become difficult to maintain as the workforce ages out of it, and a decades-long migration of young people toward Tokyo and Sendai that has left these prefectures with some of the most dramatically aged populations in the country. Akita Prefecture has a birth rate consistently among the lowest in Japan and a population that has been in freefall for years. As of recent figures, Akita's population is declining faster than almost any other prefecture in the country. Entire school districts have been consolidated or closed. Villages that had functioning grocery stores a decade ago no longer do. An elderly resident of a remote Akita hamlet, speaking to a journalist about what daily life looks like as the community empties around her, described driving 40 minutes each way to reach the nearest shop. That is not unusual for this part of Japan. It is Tuesday. Aomori has its own version of the same story. Dramatic natural landscapes, a deeply rooted local culture, apple orchards and fishing communities that have sustained people for generations, and a demographic trajectory that worries everyone who looks at it. The prefecture's interior towns, many of them built around industries that contracted decades ago, have aged populations and skeleton crew municipal governments doing their best to maintain services for fewer and fewer people each year. What makes Aomori and Akita the loneliest places in Japan isn't just the population numbers. It's the sheer geographic scale of the emptying. These are large prefectures. The loneliness isn't concentrated in one village or one abandoned building. It's spread across hundreds of kilometers of mountains, coastline, and farmland, where the human presence is thinning year by year, quietly, without drama, like light fading at the end of a long afternoon. Japan's rural emptying is not a story with a tidy conclusion. There are towns on this list that are trying. Matchmaking programs, zero-waste initiatives, migration coordinators, scarecrow installations. Some of those efforts are working in small ways. None of them have reversed the underlying arithmetic. Japan's population is contracting, and the places furthest from the center are contracting first and fastest. What they leave behind is not ruins, exactly. It's something more like a slow exhale. Towns that haven't ended yet, but are learning what ending feels like. If you found this video worth your time, please hit the like button and subscribe. There's a lot more of Japan's quieter, stranger, harder stories still to tell.